What's going on, RotoGrinders? Dean here. It's Dean 7904. Welcoming you back to the Advanced Sports Analytics Show. It's week 9. Usual suspects are back at it. Stuart Gibson, Brandon Adams. Stuart, week 9, we made it. This is the time I think we kind of say, we go, hey, time's flying. Week 9 is about the time you say, you know what? How did we get here so fast? And then we start doing that. Oh, it's week 13. Can you believe it? Well, we're at the halfway post. Or I guess we're a little bit past it. If you want to get all technical with the math. Stuart? How we doing as far as week 8? We take a peek back, of course. And then we'll take a look at week 9 in a second. We'll give a bunch of picks, obviously, show off the ASA app as well. But let's take a gander as far as week 8. We talked about it briefly before the show, but it sounds like you had a pretty good week.
Yeah. Been doing well past couple of weeks. And, I kind of think we're getting to that point where the data points that we've been seeing unfold over the course of the season, we can start to kind of trust what we're seeing, if we've been paying attention and being diligent about reviewing games on a week-to-week basis and really looking back. I think, we're going to start to that's going to pay off. And I think we're going to be able to really trust what we've been seeing so far. And it's going to give us an edge moving forward.
That's always the tricky part of football. Like once you get the big enough sample size, okay, the season's about to end. So it's kind of the delicate balance of that. Bringing in Brandon Adams, of course, as well. Brandon, how was week 8 for you?
Week 8 was a very light week for me. I had some conflicts. I played very little. Had some run good on Sunday night. Decided to gamble it up. Played the showdown slate. Got there. So I'm going to invite Stuart down to Miami. We're going to party during the DraftKings Championships.
Oh, nice. We talked about it.
Allow me 2 guests. It'll be Dean, you, and Stuart.
Dude, I'm in, man. Let's go. All
right. Are you seriously in? Stuart can be a little bit of a homebody, so he might turn down the invitation.
It's funny. I'm actually in my childhood home. I came back to Houston to watch the World Series with some family and friends. So I'm back in Houston recording in my my parents' office in my house growing up. Truly a homebody this week.
So Dean,
sure.
you can tell him how terrible it is at the fantasy championships.
Hey, I have family down there. I have a couch to crash on for sure. And is that the DK championships that are going to be Miami this year? Or was he Miami?
Yeah.
Okay, nice.
And by the way, since we both have the Miami connection, we need to talk about one thing that I think is actually central to this slate.
Yes.
Is Miami how are they really trying to lose? I find it hard to believe, but I watched the game and I was also watching the betting prices. I wasn't betting, but I just sort of had that Betfair screen up there and I was just sort of watching everything. And it was remarkable that they were never even close to being a favorite in that game. They had 2 touchdowns, a lot of clock gone, and possession. And they weren't even close to being a favorite in that game. The betting markets were wise to it. And then you watch the game play out, and it really did look like they were trying to lose. I don't know. How do we see this Miami team right now?
Well, here's what I would say. I would say management probably doesn't want to win, but the players out there, they're not guaranteed beyond this year. Most of those players, they want to put good stuff on tape, so they're trying. But they're also not that talented, and the coaches probably quite possibly are not putting them in the best position to shine on tape. That's sort of my take. Ideally, they want to, if they were going to lose a game or if they were going to win a game, they'd want to be Pittsburgh, right? Because they have Pittsburgh's draft pick. So they can somehow middle it and maybe get the number 1 pick and the number 5 pick if things kind of work out for them, if you want to play the whole conspiracy theory out. But, I don't think the players are out there actively trying to tank. And also the coaching staff's not guaranteed next year. right? Like, but management's probably telling them to do certain things as well too. And in theory, they're going to be around longer, but who knows? You know what I thought you were going to go with? I thought you were going to ask me about the Jets playing the Dolphins. And I said in a previous podcast, not a very fun game to watch. The most interesting thing about the Jets and Dolphins this week, Brandon, watching the crowd. Well, what do you have? What does Vegas have as far as number of fights in the crowd, as far as Jets Dolphins? Because historically, that's basically the most interesting part of that game.
I didn't know that. I didn't have that history.
Yeah, a lot of New Yorkers down in Miami.
History of Jets Dolphins fights.
Yeah. Oh yeah, in the crowds.
Well,
yeah,
I'm surprised. Interesting.
I don't know how that affects things for DFS. Probably none.
All right, so that's not the game to take the kids to. That's what you're telling me.
Yes, or get a suite or something like that. Yeah, get the luxury box suites. Don't just don't get the nosebleeders. I wouldn't. There's plenty of room to sprawl out. I would imagine for Jets. Well, a lot of the New Yorkers actually bought their tickets in the beginning of the season when there's still some promise there, I suppose.
It is amazing going to the Miami airport. A lot of people from all teams fly in for the day, go to the game, and then fly out at night. Like if you go to the airport on a Sunday night, there are hundreds and hundreds of people from the opposing team that just go in for the day, and they're like really drunk in the security line, and that's their plan.
I don't know. Stuart, you still go to football games? Oh, is that a sore question because you're a St. Louis guy? Because now it's not an option really anymore? Or?
No, I'm a Houston guy. I've never been to a football game. Just baseball and basketball were the sports I followed most closely growing up. Did some college stuff, some college football games. But, never been to a pro game. I don't know, man. Comfort of couch, homebody lifestyle, I guess.
Yeah, that's the same way I'm at. As far as the NFL game, college is a little bit more fun, more fun atmosphere. I like the pageantry, but like we were talking about, give me the sweet life, and all of a sudden I'm interested, Brandon. But I don't know. I want to be able to be comfortable on my couch, just like Stuart is. Especially if it's Dolphins Jets or an island game, maybe we can talk. But if it's like 700 games going on and I have no red zone, I feel like I'm missing out. That's just me, I suppose. All right.
I hear you. Our minds have changed, right? Like it's an ADD world. It's better on the couch with the computer.
I suppose that's what's going on. So, Brandon, I was talking to Stuart before the show as far as week 9, and we'll give our picks in a second. Obviously, we're going to show off the app at ASA that's going to probably help. I'm looking for some help here, Brandon, because this slate, it's a short slate because there's we're looking at a London game. So, who's playing at London? Houston and Jacksonville playing Sunday early, so they're obviously not going to be in the main slate. A 10-gamer, the Monday nighter with Dallas and the Giants not in the main slate. New England and Baltimore not in the main slate as well. And we got Tampa and Seattle, Detroit, and Oakland as like the premier games, I suppose. We're not sure if Mahomes is going to play just yet. We're recording this Halloween night, actually. Happy Halloween to everybody out there. Brandon, and there's like not a ton of value out there as far as this slate, just like building lineups, like just kind of messing around. Like, I don't know. Either you have really low expectations. I feel like you should not like your lineups right now. Maybe that's just me. I don't like my lineups, what I'm coming up with.
Well, you have that cash game mentality, Dean, which is a handicap. You like certainty at each position. It's not the slate for that, but I see it as a good tournament slate.
All right. Well, hey, I'm going to stay tuned to the rest of the show because I want to hear some good tournament picks for sure. But Stuart, are you with me on that one, or you guys are both kind of from that tournament perspective, where you kind of like the uncertainty, I suppose? I
do mostly cash. I mean, I don't know. I'm kind of seeing my way to a lineup that I feel good about, and we'll get to that in the picks. But I don't know if it's a lineup where there's not easily kind of spottable value, like everyone else is going through that struggle as well. And I don't know. I think I've done reasonably well in previous slates where there isn't the obvious value plays that open up. So I don't know. We'll see how news kind of breaks, and I'm sure there'll be some plays that become immediately obvious. We might have to work for some of the other ones, but sure we'll be able to get there and find a lineup that I like.
All right, so we're gonna do a little screen share, Stuart. You're gonna show one of the ways to help identify the solid picks this week through your app, through ASA's app, the defense versus position app, and feel free to take that away and talk to people through what you're doing there.
Yeah, sure. So this week or actually I guess in the last 2 weeks, we've rolled out this one new application, our DVP app. And then we have another one that's about ready. We're kind of working to publish to the site, just like a correlation app. But yeah, I don't know. DVP is, I think some people are into it, some not. I think, you'd be foolish not to at least consider kind of who different players are playing and how those teams have performed in the past. So we put together, or I put together this DVP app that allows users to, access a couple different cuts of data such that they can understand what teams are, what defenses are allowing kind of fantasy goodness where, and how they're doing it. So a couple just features I want to point out is it is kind of you can specify the date range you want to look at. So it's default to just show 2019. If you have a defense that's kind of stayed in the same form dating back to last year, you can, push your date back and kind of choose like the long stats, which, give you kind of more stability. But obviously there's some, risk there if defenses have shuffled around a lot in the last year. And you can also choose positions you want to look at. So we're mostly looking, there's no DS kind of, OVP, no defense versus DST, but looking at QB, running back, wide receiver, and you can, identify the columns that you want to look at and sort on in the app. So one that I've been looking at a lot is just when selecting running backs, what teams are allowing kind of most fantasy points per rush attempt. We saw last week Carolina going into the weekend was allowing the most fantasy points per rush attempt on season. And Tevin Coleman blew up against them, and when we get to running backs, I think it's a spot I might want to look to attack with Tennessee's running back Derrick Henry, and they're pretty far ahead of the field. You can also look at market shares and how different defenses are kind of allocating their market shares to different positions. So sorting on that, identifying maybe I know last year like Atlanta was just a massive funnel to targets to running backs. Kind of hasn't been the case as much this year, and let's see, I guess they're not on the main slate this week, but it's useful for if you want to identify pass catching running backs who might be in a good spot to just see a lot of targets, or tight ends who might be seeing a lot of targets, large market share there. You can sort on that. You can also look at fantasy points per target, stuff like air yards market share, fantasy points per air yard. Quarterback stuff is interesting. It's a little different kind of column set, but we're looking at sack percentages that different defenses, apply to quarterbacks, complete or fantasy points per pass attempt, fantasy points per scramble. So I think we tweeted out from our account, I was a little bearish on Kyler today in Showdown. I think I'm going to end up playing him anyways, but just because the money's there. But, San Francisco, we're only looking at Sunday. So you can also filter on what slate you're looking at. But San Francisco is just really stingy against the pass per attempt. They're allowing the second fewest fantasy points behind only New England. And, a big part of Kyler's game is his ability to scramble. And San Francisco is allowing the fewest fantasy points per scramble. So these are just examples of how you might attempt to use our DVP app. If you're a subscriber to ASA, we had it free last weekend. It's now behind the paywall, but if you are a subscriber, want to think about being a subscriber, this is one of the tools you'll have access to. And yeah, I guess just thinking about defenses, wanted to open up the conversation with you guys to understand, maybe discuss just defenses that in general you're thinking to attack moving forward, or defenses that you want to attack specifically with a positional unit. Like I know early on in the season, I think people were really on to Arizona with tight ends. It's been kind of up and down over the last couple of weeks. Philadelphia with wide receivers. Are there any other kind of defensive spots that when you guys see are really licking your chops and eager to attack with a certain position?
Brandon?
Well, I think you've got some good GPP type spots this week. I think Oakland, Detroit will be a very, very positive game environment and a very popular game and an interesting tournament setup because there are a lot of ways you can go on each team. So that seems pretty clear cut for me. I think I think Jameis is viable. He's been typical Jameis, like highly volatile, lots of turnovers, but he has had some big slate-winning performances, and I think Seattle has been giving up quite a lot, so I feel that's a good upside spot. Philly is just real by both the data and the eyeball test, so I think that's a good tournament spot as well. And Trubisky has been a streaky quarterback, and he has the right price point. I believe he's won the Millionaire Maker 3 times. You wouldn't have guessed that just because he doesn't seem like that guy, but that price point is really nice. Like if you have someone 5,000, you can save like almost 2,000 off the top tier quarterbacks. If there's a shot that they're a top 3 quarterback on the week, then you want to fire it in big field tournaments, because that's going to earn you quite a lot of upside at the other positions.
So you mentioned how applicable is that as far as the defense versus position? Because Brandon, DK, full point PPR, Henry just does not catch the football. I suppose, of course, he can run for 120 yards and get in the box 2 times, and who cares if he has 0 catches? Does that deter you from rostering him on DK? Do you have any hard and set rules, or will we do it because the Carolina defense is so vulnerable?
Yeah, the price point is a sweet spot, especially since this is the first slate where they've really priced up aggressively, the most aggressive pricing on running backs. McCaffrey doesn't have much tournament interest for me at 10K. Dalvin Cook, I think, is in a great spot. I would prefer Dalvin Cook a lot over McCaffrey. But that price is tough. So in tournaments, yeah, I think Henry is in a good spot, and you do need the touchdown. And if you have him in the Millionaire Maker, you need 2 touchdowns. But I think it's a worthy play this week.
Cook, would you prefer Mahomes in the game or not in the game?
I would prefer Mahomes not in the game, although I don't have strong views there.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. Like I've kind of gone back and forth on it. And last we saw, I think he wants to play, and the doctor's having to give him an all clear. Again, it's just Thursday night. We don't know just yet. So just sort of that's pending. That's sort of up in the air. I think KC, is that on the board right now in Vegas? I think I saw it at 2, or is it a pick'em? What's the line in that game currently, or is it off the board? I'm making that up.
It wasn't on the board yesterday. I haven't checked today.
I think it's on. It's 3.
Okay.
By 3.
All right. I don't know if that's a tell or anything. That's basically saying those teams are even. Yeah.
Well, one thing about, just going back to this tool, like KC running back wise, they're pretty, I guess, susceptible to being, hit through the air by running back. So I do think, if Mahomes does play, there is kind of this opportunity to, just force, I guess, Minnesota to a aggressive offensive option. Dalvin Cook's a guy we know that can get the job done both on the ground and as a pass catcher. It's hard to say which you prefer, because ahead it just gives him an opportunity to run the ball a bunch. But I think I'm intrigued by kind of his upside if he can really be a big factor in the pass game. Should Mahomes play and KC really push the tempo a little bit.
Yeah, so before we fully dig in as far as our picks by position on week 9, Stuart, you also want to show off, and this might lead to a conversation I wanted to have, and I'll just kind of put it in the back burner for now, the player-to-player correlation. Correlation is obviously very important. Stuart, like you could say, X is a good play, this guy's a good play, here's 7 good plays, but a lot of people don't realize lineup construction is one of the most important things, especially when it comes to tournaments, obviously. Lineup construction correlation is very important as well. So show us how you would use the correlation tool to help build lineups.
Yeah, so this app just put together, I think, finished it up like last night, and it's not on the site yet. We're working with our web designer to get it up on the site, but I think it'll be really useful, and we'll probably make it free this weekend for anyone that wants to use it. At the moment, it's running a bit slow, so I'm going to try to work with the code a little bit and see if I can't do something that makes it run a little faster. But I think these correlation calculations are kind of computationally not super efficient, but yeah. So the premise is it's a input where you can select kind of a left and right side set of players, and I think we'll start. You can select either a player by name. So like if you want to look at Houston's passing correlation between Watson and his receivers, you could go Watson. You could type in DeAndre Hopkins by name, or you can select the whole set. Filter on date range. Right now, we're going to, I think, put in a couple correlation metrics, like see how players' market share correlates between receivers. But right now, it's just fantasy points, I think, is the only one you can select. And it'll just output a list of the players that you have, kind of the left column, player one set, right column, player two. You can identify which players kind of correlate most strongly with a quarterback, which is obviously important for team stacking. And one guy who's I think been super popular to pair with Watson is Will Fuller, I think, for like really good reason. I mean, their correlations just show strong. The games that Fuller goes off, it's on these big downfield plays where he's kind of getting these big chunk plays that really help the quarterback as well. I think kind of and we see like Hopkins just not correlating quite as strong with Watson. And I think like you have these receivers that correlate well with quarterbacks when they do gain fantasy points through big chunk play touchdowns. Like ways in which a receiver and quarterback might not correlate as strongly are where these receivers are getting kind of dink and dunk, like low ADOT receptions, where they're able to accumulate points quite quickly through the reception bonus. But the quarterback's not really accumulating points that quickly because just the value of a passing yard isn't quite as strong as the value of a rushing or receiving yard. And so that's, I think, kind of where positive correlate, you can use the tool for positive correlation. Maybe you have like two quarterbacks that you're considering, two I guess team stacks that you're considering, and you want to identify like which of, Watson and his receivers versus, Jameis and Godwin and Evans, right? And you want to see like which stacks might offer kind of the best or strongest like correlation opportunities. I think this tool is, could be quite useful for doing that. And like I said, it runs a bit slow, but patient. So you can begin to kind of see how maybe different team stacks might compare in terms of their correlations. So it's interesting. I mean, Godwin's been awesome this year. He hasn't really correlated very strongly with Winston. Evans, kind of that downfield threat type receiver, in kind of the same mold as Fuller, maybe a little bigger, not quite as fast. Has just a really strong correlation with Winston. So that's, I think, a useful application in the positive correlation side. And I think negative correlation is just as important. If you're either trying to construct a cash lineup where you want negative correlation built in to raise your floor. I think like one instance where I'm trying to use negative correlation is when we have an injured player and want to identify who might be the primary beneficiary of that injury. I think with running back, like it's pretty straightforward, right? It's just like the next guy in line. But when you have some of these complex receiver depth charts and you have a guy go down, it's sometimes not abundantly clear like who the primary beneficiary is going to be as we wait for this to load. And I think identifying guys who negatively correlate is a really good opportunity or a good approach to identifying maybe that injury beneficiary. So we saw Will Fuller down last week, and I'm not sure what his status is for this week. Not on the main slate though, so I mean of kind of less relevance. But I think it was kind of a bit of an exercise to figure out, if the Will Fuller injury really stood to benefit a Houston receiver in a big way, and if that was a game you want to stack, and if so, like who's going to be the primary beneficiary. And I actually my cash line went with both Hopkins and Stills. I just felt like there was kind of good negative correlation there. And when you could project Fuller to be out, the idea with negative correlation is like when one does well, the other does poorly, or when one does poorly, the other does well. And essentially an injury is just like a 0-point game. I mean, it's just like a really bad game. So identifying guys who are prone to excel in games in which Will Fuller does poorly, I think could be like synonymous with a guy who might succeed in the absence of Will Fuller due to injury. So that's how you use the application. Again, date filtration. So if you, right now we're at a point now in 2019 where I think like we can look at the past 8 weeks and feel fairly confident with what we've seen. But if you are looking for more, long data, you can also go back to like 2018 or even further. Another feature to call is this drop inactives game. So the app defaults where if a player doesn't play, they won't like count that as a 0 for them. It'll just drop that game from their data set, which I think like I prefer as the default, just because you're just likely to see like some kind of skewed data points when you're counting a guy not playing as a true 0 for that player. But if you're looking at a player who's just like often been injured, it could be, worthwhile to uncheck that, have that player's injured game count as a true 0 and kind of see how correlation plays out from there. So that's all I got. I don't know if you guys kind of have any thoughts on, how you're thinking to incorporate correlation into your lineup construction from a cash or GPP standpoint. But I just want to show off that tool for you guys.
Thoughts, Brandon?
Well, for me, correlation is the absolute central consideration in tournaments. And I think for me, like everyone in NBA, our correlation data historically has been probably the most valuable tool that you could possibly have for NBA tournaments. And we're the only people that really have good correlation data. For NFL, it's very valuable for tournaments, extremely valuable. The way to think about it is if you're winning, say, the Millionaire Maker, where you're having to beat 250,000, 300,000 players, you have to hit a parlay where you're hitting in every spot. Or maybe in a tournament week, you hit on every spot but one. It's much easier to hit that parlay if when one spot hits, it's very likely that another spot hits as well. And so your chance of having the winning tournament lineup, although it's a very simple point, it's much, much higher if you have a lot of correlation in your lineup. So to use this week as an example, again, it's like so simple that it doesn't even hardly bear pointing out to the tournament player, but I think people still forget it, just in the same way that they forget that in baseball, like stacking tends to be a smart thing to do. But let's say this week in football, if you choose to play Russell Wilson, which will be a popular choice, paying up for quarterback like that, you need him to be the highest scoring quarterback on the week, most likely, if you're going to have a tournament winning lineup. He can get there in two real ways. Like he can either have a unusual rushing game, or much more likely he has a 4 TD game, a 4 passing TD game. If he has a 4 passing TD game, it's Chris Carson has not been catching a lot of passes this year. It's most likely to come from the air. So although it's like stupid simple, you just play Russell Wilson with Lockett and Metcalf. And then if Wilson does what you need him to do, Lockett and Metcalf almost automatically do what you need them to do. So you simplify the parlay that you need to hit.
So here's my question: Is Pete Carroll, how stubborn is he, Brandon? Because everybody knows this. We all know this. By the way, he just learned about air yards. I'm not sure if you heard that. Somebody mentioned air yards to him, and he's like fast. He's like, what? He just became aware of that concept. So everybody knows that Tampa is a pass funnel. Everybody knows that Pete Carroll wants to run the ball, especially when he's ahead. I think you mentioned Russ. He was threw the ball 5 times last game in the second half. He was 5 for 5, but it was only 5 times because they were ahead. If you run the ball with Carson at Tampa, it's probably not going to be successful. And you can definitely throw the ball at Tampa. They're also favored by 7. So in theory, Carroll's going to want to grind this game down, a win in the second half. Do you think Carroll's going to adjust, or he's just going to say, screw it, I want to run the ball, and that's it? Like, how stubborn is he, basically, is my question.
I think you assume that he does the right thing, and you play this slate in a very straightforward way, and you have, for me, just 0 Carson and an overweight position in Wilson and the pass catchers. So you basically assume that he does what he's supposed to do.
Yeah, and you're running it back, I assume, in the same lineup with either Evans or Godwin on the other side?
Yes. And that's another form of building correlation in your lineups. It's obvious enough, but you need the game to go off, so you need someone from the other side, 1 or 2 players from the other side.
And this kind of opens up our picks for this week, and I want to talk about Jameis as well, too, because I think this is probably – if not the most interesting game in the slate, one of the most interesting games in the slate, and not coincidentally enough, it's the highest total as well. And by the way, you mentioned Godwin, you mentioned Evans. I don't know how to figure out which one's going to have the smash game or not, but since week 2, if you just kind of jump, if you pick the right guy between Godwin and Evans, if you said, listen, I'm going to play a Tampa Bay receiver every single week, week 2, Godwin, 29 points, week 4, 44 points, week 5, 34 points, week 6, 28. And the other weeks, the ones where Godwin isn't going nuts, Evans put up 48 points in week 3. He put up 45 points in week 8. He was okay, I guess. He was not great, but 20 points in week 6. Stuart, just pick one of these guys on Tampa, and it's a 50% chance they're going to go absolutely nuts and be on tournament-winning lineups. Is it that simple?
I mean, it's felt like that at times, but I mean, I do think that, I just pulled them up now, and they have insane negative, 61% correlation or whatever. And I think it makes Tampa a tough team to stack, as kind of your primary game stack for that reason alone. I think, we want to find stacks where there is kind of enough volume and just kind of a scheme that's able to support 2 receivers with our quarterback. And I do think, the approach might be to just go with the Russell Lockett Metcalf as kind of your primary stack, and then just mix around, sprinkling of Godwin and Evans. It seems like they're both clearly at times find themselves in excellent spots, and both clearly talented guys. And it almost feels, somewhat random as to who has the big game and who doesn't. But one thing that doesn't feel random is that they don't seem to be able to kind of excel simultaneously. And because of that, I can't really see even though I agree, I think Jameis is in a really good spot. That's a guy I'm probably going to want to just single stack, or maybe go Godwin Brait or Evans Brait. But Jameis, Godwin, Evans just doesn't feel at least from what we've seen so far, it doesn't feel like a very viable combo, just given their inability to not coexist, but just succeed in tandem.
Yeah. How do we know this, Brandon? How do we know which week it's going to be, a Godwin week or an Evans week, or we just kind of split it and say, okay, we're going to run 30% Jameis lineups, and half of those 30% lineups we're going to have half Godwin and half Evans? Is that the approach?
Yeah, well, that's a gift, right, for tournaments when you have those situations. So I think you do exactly that, simple as it is. And in this case, it's perfect because they're priced about the same, 7,200 and 7,300. So yeah, I think that's a gift, right? When to have that where you tend to have one or the other go off huge. And I think this is a week where it would be perfectly reasonable, although they haven't gone off together, to play both of them together. But yeah, there's so many spots in NFL where like you love New England running, but New England running historically hasn't worked like that, where if the top three options were all priced the same and you just played all three, it would be nice if one of them had a RB1 score, but their position doesn't work like that. It's actually a good situation for tournaments when that happens. Haven't looked at the injury reports. There's a chance that Brait and Howard are both out, right?
Yeah, is that a possibility? Howard, I think, is almost definitely going to be out, but again, Thursday, so not exactly sure. As far as Brait, yeah, he's questionable as well too. And is there a third guy? It's gonna be I don't know the next guy man is up. To be honest, Stuart, you got the third guy?
Yeah, no, I don't.
I think it's Leclerc, and he's 2,500. So that's your other option if you're playing Winston. You try to. There's a lot of value if you could punt tight end this week. So you run Godwin in the 2,500 tight end or Evans in the 2,500 tight end, and you just pray for that 5 reception, 1 touchdown game from your 2,500 tight ends.
So away from that, Seattle Tampa game, Stuart, other quarterbacks that kind of jump out you as far as this week. I think the Detroit Oakland game is pretty appealing. I wish it was in a dome. I like to have my players in a dome, but I think it's still fine out there on the West Coast. Certainly Carr and Stafford throwing the ball much more down the field these days too, which is nice, certainly appealing as well, like that A-dot. Those quarterbacks are appealing as well. Is there anybody else that kind of jumps off the board? We're seeing the cheapest quarterback I think we see in the entire season starting for Denver this year, a person I was not aware of until like 3 or 4 days ago. Brandon Allen will be throwing footballs to players in uniforms. He's 4.1K on DK, and in a week where we're kind of pinching pennies, I don't know. I can't. That's my best endorsement. What do we have here as far as the other quarterback, Stuart?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know much about this Denver quarterback. I mean, Cleveland is, I think, a team that. But with you, Stafford has been rolling lately, and Oakland in our DVP app is showing up as the most kind of attackable in terms of a fantasy point per attempt defense against the quarterback. And we also have like a air yards projection tool at kind of a team level that I think we've shown in the past, and I like looking at it a lot. Detroit, I believe, at the moment is second behind Jameis, Tampa Bay. I just wish he was priced a little lower. I mean, 6'8" feels pretty high for.
Nope, I'm not sure if we're losing
team this career, but
Brandon, are you hearing Stuart? He's kind of coming in and out for me.
In and out, but it's not terrible.
Okay, so I wasn't sure if that was a connection on my end or not.
No. I think it's all right. I mean, it's a little bit of a spotty connection,
okay.
But it's not too bad.
But Detroit and Stafford, I mean, appear to be in good spots. I just wish Stafford was cheaper. I mean, 6 does feel pretty high for him. He's a guy who kind of over long form isn't necessarily someone who's going to be like living in the 20 fantasy point range. I think he's a very strong tournament play, and Detroit's kind of these offices where we have a presence around tertiary stacking option around one of those kind of 2 elite receivers or kind of top tier receivers. Derek Carr I like a lot. I mean, I think he to me is popping as one of the sub 6 quarterbacks that I think could pay off his value pretty well. I don't know that it's the best double stacking environment for him. Tyrell and Waller are kind of his 2 best targets, but they similar to like Evans Godwin, just don't seem to do super well in tandem. But I think from a cash game standpoint, he could allow getting a quarterback at 5.5 could allow you to get up to one of those elite running backs you like, or really pay up for a couple receiver spots. So he's a guy that I'm kind of interested in from a cash game standpoint for sure.
Yeah, Brandon, feel free to add another quarterback or two, or any thoughts you want to knock out as far as the Detroit game there with Stafford and Carr as well, or if you want, open up the running back position.
So I'm keeping the tournament quarterbacks really tight this week. I'll be on Stafford, Trubisky, Winston, and Carr. That's just sort of where I'm going, keeping it very simple. Rivers maybe also viable. Might have a sprinkling of him, but that's pretty much all I'm doing. And then running back, relative to other weeks, I'm usually a little all over the map, but I'm going to be even more all over the map this week. I can just see myself really sprinkling it around. For me, this is the week more than any other week so far that you're kidding yourself if you think that you can say with high probability that a guy is going to be a top 3 running back on the week. I think there's just a lot of variance this week in who it is. And so you really want to sprinkle it around, and you have to pay a lot of attention to the field size that you're trying to attack. So for me personally, the only time that I would play McCaffrey is if it's heads up, although I haven't looked in full detail at heads up lineup construction. But even then, heads up 3-way, that's the only time I'm using Cook or McCaffrey, and it's probably Cook. For medium field tournaments, say 300 people, I'm going to be typically in the mid-range, probably like Jalen Samuels and one other guy, maybe Chubb, maybe Gordon, maybe Aaron Jones if he's healthy. And then if it's Millionaire Maker, I'll probably have a lot of chalk. Like I'll probably have maybe 75% Jalen Samuels paired with one other punt. Like this might be the last week ever that you can play Adrian Peterson as a punt. Just wish for that 2-touchdown performance. I think Damian Williams is a viable punt. Mark Walton. This is a great week to just play 2 nearly min-price running backs. I think that's the best play in the big field tournaments. And then with 30% of your lineups, just pass up on the Jalen Samuels equity and play 2 cheap running back. Play like Mark Walton with Damian Williams, and then hope Jalen has a 9 fantasy point game and those 2 guys do well. So that's pretty much my play. I think you should spread around the running back allocations quite a bit this week.
Thursday night, so it's super, super early as far as the ownership projections, and lots can change. The ownership projections are fluid all the way up the lock, Brandon. But we have Samuels right now on DK. His projection, you want to guess, or what would you guess it would be? The assumption is that it's his backfield and everybody else is injured, basically, as of right now.
What tournament is this for? Millionaire Maker?
I think it's for a large field GPP contest, like a general large field GPP contest, which is the Millionaire Maker, I suppose, would work for that.
This is the first like super clear cut, insane chalk that we've had. So 70.
Yeah, it's going to be a big number. We're seeing 42% right now, but like if nothing else changes in this slate, it's going to be hard not to play him. And again, this is under the assumption that he's the last man standing for Pittsburgh, that Connor is going to be out as well too. I believe he missed practice once again today on Thursday. It's not looking positive for him to play, and stay tuned. These things are fluid, but if Samuels is the go-to guy there for Pittsburgh and he's 4K on DK and there's not a ton of value, and you mentioned Mark Walton, does he fit in on your narrative? The Dolphins are actively trying to lose. Like, we don't think he's good, right? So maybe they play him more. Not that they have, Balaj. Who knows if he's good or not either.
That Walton's been dominating Balaj in terms of recent snaps. I think Walton will be the guy. I think Walton is a good play. I was half messing around when I said they were trying to lose. It was just my own frustration rooting for the Dolphins and watching the betting odds. I was amazed at how on point they were. And then you saw the game, so the plays were not good. The outcomes were not good. But I think Mark Walton is a strong play. And I'm also higher than average on Le'Veon Bell this week. I'll have no Carson, but I'll have probably a little bit more Le'Veon Bell than the field.
He's not justified that price.
Josh Jacobs will be popular, but I won't have Josh Jacobs. He did well for me a few weeks ago, but I think I'm going to play that game as an air it out, and all the stacks are going to be air yard stacks and playing for that really high total. And Jacobs, I don't think he has the upside you need at 6,500. I think it's much more likely that the winning tournaments are going to have two cheap QBs. And he's not your every down back. He's more like 50 to 60% of snaps. I don't see it. I don't see that getting there this week in a big field.
I'm curious what the Chargers are going to do with the new the OC was replaced. You mentioned being a Dolphin. This is what I'm wondering. When they were going for the win, the 2-point conversion, were you rooting for them to connect on that? Because that seemed like a play call that was designed not to be successful at the buzzer a couple weeks back.
Yeah, I didn't see that game, so I can't say.
Fair enough. And you mentioned Le'Veon Bell, and it's like there's a big Dolphins tax here. He's not justified the price they're asking for basically all season or since week 1 or week 2. Not necessarily his fault, but the production's not necessarily been there. Obviously they've been without their quarterback as well too, and they've been some tough matchups facing, I guess, New England twice, Buffalo as well. Stuart, jump in here. As far as your running backs this week, who are we looking at?
Yeah, I mean, I'm inclined, and I come from, I do mostly cash games. I mean, I'm inclined to work to try to get some McCaffrey on a slate where there's so much uncertainty with some of these running backs. I mean, Carson's a guy I've been really leaning on through most of the season, and I just think he's in a spot where I'm just really not that interested in playing him. It's just a tough matchup, and so yeah, I think I'll probably split kind of between a high end guy like McCaffrey, who I prefer a little more than Dalvin Cook, and yeah, then kind of settling down in the mid range. Jalen Samuel's value opens up. He's a guy. I think just at 400, I think it's pretty difficult for him to fail. Indy's kind of a middling match. Yeah, I think Melvin Gordon's interesting. Green Bay is actually another defense that can be had on the ground by running backs. So 5,000. Even though, I mean, I think Eckler is just a far superior running back at this point. Just that Gordon's so cheap, and the volume is there, and I think he's got a strong matchup. So I'm intrigued by Derrick Henry. He's just going to do next to nothing for you in the passing game, but Tennessee is going to be a very run heavy team if they can kind of control the game script the way they would like to. Carolina is just a team that's really been giving up a lot of fantasy value. If he found the end zone a couple, at least once, and even a couple.
Dean, did you watch Ty Johnson last week?
I caught some of it, but I mostly just watched Red Zone, and I know they ran out 4 running backs they addressed that week, so it was I moved off them basically almost 100%. I had a sprinkle just in case, but I just wasn't buying it. I didn't think he was the workhorse type anyway. I thought you're lucky if you get maybe 12 to 15 touches, and I just I wasn't in on it. So I was happy to be. I don't know how chalky he ended up being. I feel like some people probably moved off him, Edwards was the guy I had for Arizona because there was only 2 running backs. Unfortunately, he got hurt, but that's just playing results, I suppose. Were you in on him, or what was your thoughts?
Yeah, I was in. But unfortunately, I didn't see the game, so I have no eyeball test to go with, and I don't know what to do this week. Probably, at most you'd play him a few percent, right? But
yeah, I mean Carson's dinged for what it's worth, but like I just don't know how much work Johnson's going to get even then. But I suppose in a tournament, and he's not even that cheap. 4.9K is not just great price. We talk about if you believe defenses don't matter. Like I don't know, some people believe that, some people don't, and it's kind of a great conversation too. Montgomery had 27 carries last week. Of course, you don't necessarily want to run the ball against Philadelphia. Not all touches are created equal, but if you're going to give me 20 touches for 5.2K, 20 might be conservative. I think he's kind of sort of somewhat interesting, if nothing else, in tournaments. But on this week specifically, again, because there's not a lot popping for me. What about receivers, Brandon? Are we spending up? We already touched on the Tampa guys, talked about the Seattle guys. What else is jumping out for you as far as the receivers?
I think you are going to find most of your value in that like mid-tier, like the Seattle receivers and then even cheaper like your Carolina receivers. I think you have a lot of interesting tournament guys with some upside, like Tyrell Williams. We mentioned you could play Godwin or Evans. I think Jarvis Landry, not traditionally an upside guy, but I think at the price tag, he could flash some good upside. Keenan Allen, I think, is a strong play. Watkins, I'm reading this line for Casey in Minnesota saying that Mahomes is out. 22-19. I just think he's probably out. But still, Watkins at 4,900 has your tournament upside. Juju is a strong tournament play. Preston Williams at 4,200. Like if Miami is keeping that game close, it's with Preston Williams, and he's probably going to see like double-digit targets. He's got a lot of tournament upside, I think. Yeah, I think your cash game construction is, as Stuart was saying, because of the Jalen Samuels value, it's Jalen and McCaffrey at running back, and if you're going to do a 3 running back build, it's Jalen McCaffrey Chubb or Jalen McCaffrey. I wouldn't hate Henry, but maybe Jalen McCaffrey Walton or Jalen McCaffrey Chubb, and then at wide receiver, you're really populating those cheap value wide receivers. I don't mind a cash game construction with Wilson, Metcalf, and Lockett, and then play maybe DJ Moore, and then that's kind of it. Tight ends, there are some options that are close together in value.
You mentioned Trubisky. You prefer him with Miller, Gabriel, Robinson, 2 of those 3?
I think if you're doing a midfield tournament, you're okay playing him alone. Like if you're playing a 300-person tournament, you're okay just playing naked Trubisky and then going value the rest of the way. If you're playing a large field tournament like 10,000 or more, just pick any 2. Trubisky plus any 2 catchers.
Chime in here, Stuart, as far as your receivers of choice. And, yeah, from the cash game perspective, do you have money to spend up on one big receiver, or is it mostly guys in the mid-tier?
I mean, the way I've been building so far, I don't think that's the case. I have to go back and kind of check the line I'm currently at. But, yeah, Brandon's touched on some guys that I'm intrigued by. I mean, Tyrell Williams, when healthy, has been pretty solid, seems to have a good floor as a receiver. And, I mean, 5'9" is a little more than kind of you would ideally like to pay for him. But, I mean, it's a slate where just value at receiver hasn't been opening up in a huge way, and you might have to spend on some guys who you would prefer to pay a little less for. Yeah, I mean, Preston Williams, I'm intrigued by. The Jets are kind of like an Eagles light. I mean, they're a team that really gets burned by receivers and kind of funnels a lot of their targets and air yards to wide receiver, and do have some concerns with kind of the pace of that game, like New York can slow the game down a bit, which might limit Williams' upside. But at 4.2, I mean, I think he's nicely priced and could allow you to get up to a big running back like McCaffrey. Could allow you to spend up at quarterback if that's the route you want to go. So. Yeah, I don't know. Receiver is looking a little weird this week, and we've touched on the Seattle guys, but I mean, like Metcalf is in a good spot and getting a lot of usage, but it's weird in cash, like these Seattle guys, Wilson too. Like Seattle can be so run heavy if that's kind of the route they choose to go, but it does feel like these guys, even they might like median project. Percentile projection can be quite low. I mean, if Seattle jumps out big, there's really not a whole lot of upside there. I'm sorry, there's a low floor. There's good upside if Tampa Bay can keep it close, because that passing attack is really efficient. When they do pass. Carolina guys are priced down a good bit. I don't think it's like an incredible matchup against Tennessee, and Tennessee will probably try to slow the game down a good deal, but the price tag on DJ Moore and Curtis Samuel is hard to ignore. So they're I think in my cash consideration for sure.
And to Stuart's point, this is a slate more than any other probably this year where median projections are kind of irrelevant for good tournament construction. Like, everyone focuses on median construction, and a lot of our founding idea at ASA is for tournaments, correlations and distributions are more important than median outcomes. And so much of the focus around the industry is projecting median fantasy performance and expected fantasy points per salary dollar and stuff like that. We can understand why that's true. It's like it's just a good, simple way to think about things. But it's kind of stupid to look at things in that way when you're trying to win tournaments with thousands of people. It just is. So you're much better off going with our data that's focused on distributions and correlations. Because the problem with median projections is that it will often get you on a lineup that is high equity. Like, each individual player has a nice price, but as a whole, the package is low upside. And at an extreme, you can put together a lineup that has high expected fantasy points, but actually has 0% access to the type of score that's going to win a Millionaire Maker or even a Wildcat. So that's the long ASA plug. But this week is a week where it's especially important to look at distributions. At wide receiver, you have a lot of guys that are projecting well in terms of fantasy points per dollar, but have low probability of being in the tournament lineup. Like, I would say Alshon Jeffrey, for instance, good projection. And he's a high upside guy, a hugely talented guy, but against this Chicago defense, I really don't see the massive upside. Beasley is your player, is a the player that will project well. I mean, I could see him being in a tournament winning lineup this week if ever there was a week, but for me, he'd be fairly low likelihood. I even say the Carolina guys, the Carolina receivers, their price is good, but I don't really see the tournament winning upside. I think it's important this week to look at some of the low equity guys that could be really decisive for tournaments. So, for instance, like Galladay is probably the most likely player to break the slate, but he's very low value because his price is unusually high this week. He's really priced up for the matchup, but he's a great tournament play, even though the 7,700 price tag makes him low equity. He's a great tournament play because he is, in my opinion, the most likely guy to like break the slate, to like have a 45-point game or whatever. And so I think if you were looking at equities, like you would have no Kenny Galladay or Marvin Jones, and that would be a massive mistake from a tournament construction standpoint. You definitely want one of those guys in your lineup, and like you want some juju exposure. You want some upside guys that that maybe have low equity but are your great tournament plays. This is especially true considering that you're going to have Jalen Samuels so owned, and that's going to be one spot kind of locked up. And then I think you're going to have some popular spots at receiver as well, like the Seattle guys. So you really want to differentiate at wide receiver and try to pick some of those upside guys.
Yeah, Galladay, by the way, $200 more. You mentioned the Seattle receivers, $200 more than Lockett. Lockett, current projection as far as the ownership at 15%. We're seeing Galladay at 11%. It's funny you mentioned Beasley, by the way, because Beasley, and you're talking about the like the mean ownership projections that like aren't guys that necessarily get you to the top, but like maybe you can min cash. Beasley's one of those guys that pops all the time. I look at projections around the industry, and I don't necessarily automatically follow them, but they're always interesting and of note. And always it's like, oh, there's Beasley. You can play Beasley, and I never want to play Beasley. Nobody's ever waking up in the morning and say, oh, I can't wait to play Cole Beasley today and get my 6 catches for 42 yards and maybe he falls into the end zone. Stuart, we got to step aside in just a minute here. So we didn't really touch on tight ends, just kind of a few kind of sprinkled into the conversation. Is there anybody sort of jumping out for you, maybe from a cash game perspective? Do we have the funds to spend all the way up? We punt them once again with the Jonnu Smith of the world. What are you looking at here as far as tight ends?
Yeah, I'm going to stay away from Waller. I'm seeing him at the system I'm looking at as top kind of value projected tight end, but I wasn't that into Waller last week with the return of Tyrell Williams, and I mean, same kind of thing going this week, and it's his price has only gone up, so that's probably not where I'm going to be. I mean, the Philadelphia guys to me are both intriguing. Dallas Goedert's gotten kind of an expanded role that Philadelphia has been going with this 2 tight end set a little more often, and Chicago's an interesting team against tight end. Like they actually funnel a lot of their targets and air yards to tight end. And I know neither Ertz nor Goedert are like downfield type guys, but in general, Chicago's kind of funneling volume to tight end, but they're also pretty efficient at like limiting a tight end for what it's worth. But yeah, I mean, Goedert at 3-1, super cheap and allows you to kind of pay up at running back. And Ertz is down to 4.7. I mean, that's a really cheap price for him. He at time be like a 10 catch tight end, and at 4.7, I think not like a prototype. He's got a chance to get there and really be a big guy.
Brandon, we are up against the clock, but I do want to hear your thoughts as far as tight ends.
So I'm maybe a little bit more comfortable with Waller than Stewart is. I think there are some constructions, especially if you go cheap at your two running back positions where he can fit in comfortably, and I think it's a good play. He is very likely to have a top 3 sort of tight end performance. So I think I prefer probably the cheaper tight ends in the Millionaire Maker, but say a 300-person field, I like the constructions with Waller. I agree on the Philly guys. I think those are strong plays. Tampa Bay, if injuries allow us to have it down to one guy, I think that would be a fine play. Greg Olsen is a low upside guy, but I think he's in the mix as just one of the guys that could be tight end 1 this week. I think either Doyle or Ebron, that's sort of Millionaire Maker only. I think it's a good play because historically, like, one of those guys has managed to get there, and they're both individually quite talented. TJ Hawkinson was a guy who rated okay for like season long, and some smart people were on him, and then he's been bad. And I think this is a week where he could have some tournament upside. I'd be willing to go there. Without Mahomes, you could still pay up for Kelsey on talent. He's got a decent chance of being wide receiver 1. You could pay up for Henry on talent. Jimmy Graham's going to rate very low on equity, but again, he has he has tight end 1 upside. At this stage in his career, it's sort of end zone upside, but I could see like a 2 touchdown game from Jimmy Graham as a possibility. So I think he's on the radar, even though he looks bad in projection systems. That's about it.
Yeah, I'm old enough to remember when TJ Hawkinson was the heir apparent to Gronkowski after week 1. You guys remember that? And there's certainly some skill there. There's a reason why he was drafted so highly. Obviously, he's kind of sputtered off a bit too, but certainly looks athletic out there and worthy of a roster spot against Oakland as well. And he's fairly cheap too. You can always get there with just one play as far as the tight end. We do have to step aside and get out of here. It's been fun. A great show here, obviously. Brandon, I look forward to – we're going to be hanging out in the Clevelander, apparently, in Miami.
That's right. Well, like I'm going to tell DraftKings that, we're going to go old school. Everyone's going to be in the room. It's going to be – Stuart hasn't said whether he's interested in joining us.
This is the first time I'm hearing about it.
Yeah, so it's open invitation. I didn't win the seats recently, so there we go.
Congratulations on that. Stuart, tell the people one last time as far as ASA before we get out of here.
Yeah, you can find us at advancedsportsanalytics.com or search for us on Twitter. Trying to churn out some good football content and tools. I know for me, that's kind of my focus is building dynamic tools for you guys. So you can find us there. Also working on basketball stuff, football, golf as well. But yeah, it's a football show, and we're still trying to work on football tools before the season winds down. So check us out there.
For Stuart Gibson, Brandon Adams, I'm Dean. Good luck week 9. We're out of here. Holler.